All right, we are live on Facebook. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Jonesy and Brown Show. He is Mike Jones. I am John Brown. We talk sports whenever we feel like talking sports. I wish we would say every week. It just doesn't always work out that way. But look, the NFL draft is on its way. The NFL draft is almost here. It's almost that time of year. It's time for all the people to start crunching the numbers, to start looking at the game film, to start making the case for why their team's general manager and front office either sucks or is the greatest thing since sliced bread. If you live here in Philly, you're probably making the case for the former, not the latter, but it is what it is. Wanted to bring in an expert, wanted to bring in a good friend of ours to talk NFL draft. He has one of the most, goodness, I've been paging through this all afternoon. This man has created a draft guide. And let me tell you something. For $10, you could pretty much know everything there is to know. You'll be out there. I'm not even going to call myself like Mel Kiper or anything like that. But I'm going to be sounding like Mel Kiper when I come out here. I'm going to take all this knowledge and I'm going to jump on somebody else's show and just pass it off as my own. Ladies and gentlemen, joining us here, Emory Hunt from footballgameplan.com. Emory, thank you for joining us today, man.
No, I appreciate you guys having me on.
All right, now
absolutely.
Look, you can hear Emory. You can see Emory. He's talking football on CBS.com, on CBS Sports HQ all the time. Look, man, this is a great guide. How long did it take you? How long did it take you to put something like this together?
You know, it takes about a good 2.5 weeks, to be honest, because as I'm watching film and once I finish watching a prospect, I just put my notes into the draft guide and move on to the next player. So it's nothing that requires anything different than what I'm doing. Normally, I was writing these out and just keeping the written notes to myself and just put out the video stuff that just shows the grade and ranking. But 2 years ago, I was like, let me just put out a draft guide just to be a little bit more transparent. I always wanted to do one, but I just didn't think it was the right time to do one. And last year was my first draft guide, and it helped make my process a lot easier because it also keeps you kind of accountable. Instead of putting just a grade out there, you can see, people can see your thought process. You share why you came about that grade, what games you watch, all that good stuff like that. So it's been cool. It's been fun. And it's been getting a lot of good positive feedback. And like you said, it's over 580 prospects, almost 600 pages. It helps you cover the draft, helps you cover preseason training camp. And as guys move in and out of the roster, as you may know, let's say, for instance, last year, the Eagles signed a guy, Menashe Bailey from Morgan State. No one knew who that was, but he was in our draft guide. We had a full scout report on Menashe Bailey, who's now with the New York Jets. So that's the type of info you get in the draft guide.
All right, so let me ask you this
hold on. You see, he's trying. He's already trying to work in inroads because he knows I went to Morgan State University. So he's just trying to throw that one in there real quick, and I appreciate that. Go ahead, Jonesy.
All right, so here's my question. So this is you said your second draft guide. So this process began for you under pandemic circumstances, it seems like. But with that considered, how is it for you trying to evaluate players as opposed to normal circumstances when you can actually go to games and evaluate have potential to evaluate people up close a lot more readily? People play more games, guys aren't opting out and things like that. How, explain to me, what do you find is the biggest challenge in trying to evaluate talent under these circumstances?
Well, it's unique because this year we didn't have a lot of small school players that are in this draft class because they punted to the spring. So it actually made my job a little bit easier. Last year's draft guide, I had close to 700 prospects graded. This year, it's just over 580 or something like that. It's close to 600. And so that's been the biggest change. The biggest difference was that I wasn't able to go out to, like you talked about, to the different games, but I also wasn't able to go hit the All-Star game circuit. I'm going the entire month of January, from the beginning of January until after the Senior Bowl, at 4 different All-Star games, and that wasn't able to happen this year. So it's just been, I wasn't able to be at practice for a lot of these prospects, so I had to really rely on watching those guys film and doing a lot of work pre all-star game circuit. So therefore I'm not behind. So it kind of forced me to work differently, but still was able to work the efficient manner that I was able to work in previous years.
You talked about that. You talked about smaller schools and other schools playing in the spring as instead of the fall. As a upperclassman in a program like that, does that work against them? Is it being able to be scouted, scouted in these in the all-star games and combines and pro days, or does it work out for them because it's like you got fresh tape? You have scouts and organizations being able to say, hey, I saw them play 2 weeks ago. I saw them play 3 weeks ago. Like, how does that work? How does that dynamic, how does that change how teams go into picking players?
Well, guys had to declare by January or by March 1st, honestly. If you're playing in the spring, you had until March 1st to declare for the 2021 draft. So guys that are playing in the spring at these smaller colleges are not going to be
They're not going to be in the draft. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So they just roll over. And plus, this year, the NCAA gave everybody that was seniors that free year. So this year didn't really count. So these guys get to come back. They put out tape. They get to come back and build on what they did in the spring, in the fall. So it's just outstanding to see guys playing in the spring and just be able to maximize their opportunities.
Okay, so with that being said, I want to get into it a little bit now. As you were evaluating tape, was there any one player that really surprised you, like in a good way? Like anybody that stood out to you this year? Like not the big name, big school prospect that everybody knows, but if you get what I mean, like somebody who we wouldn't expect.
I'm going to use someone from a major school because he didn't play this year. And I wasn't familiar with his game until I watched him on 2019 film. And that was Joe Tryon, the defensive end out of Washington. How I evaluate talent, I go in alphabetical order by school, right? So by the time I got to Washington, I done seen so many DNs and edge rushers that I was like, this is kind of the kind of okay class. I go watch Tryon. I'm like, Jesus, like, how is this dude not being talked about in the top 15? That's how impressive his tape was. So I was shocked that this dude was this good because, again, I hadn't seen, Joe Tryon in an exclusive manner. And in 2019, you kind of watching everybody and kind of stick to who's seniors and who have declared. So I was actually shocked at how talented this dude was coming out of Washington. So he was one that really surprised me, and everybody else you kind of watched throughout the year. So you're very familiar with, but for him as an opt-out guy to be that explosive, that dynamic, that athletic, he reminded me a lot of Montez Sweat.
Okay. Very athletic guy to compare him to.
That's good. That's good to hear. Like, where do you, like a player like that, where do you see him going? I mean, are we talking top 10, top 15, top 20?
Probably top 20 because the NFL loves long athletic guys that can run. And, he fits the mold. And the fact of the matter is he tested well at his pro day. So he checks all those boxes that people want those athletic testing guys to have. But the on-field production is where it needed to be. And you can kind of see the upside. The trajectory is going in the right direction because he was able to put out good films to close out 2019. Didn't play this year, but was still able to keep in good football shape and good athletic shape to test well. So he's checking all these boxes. They're looking to take a guy like that within the top 20, especially in a class where you have some questions about the edge rusher and the depth of the position.
Well, you're talking about edge rushers. You talk about a player like a Joe Tryon, and you have him ranked top. Like, you have him ranked at the top. Like, how big is the gap between a player like Tryon and a player that you have second, like a Ronnie Perkins out of Oklahoma?
Well, Perkins is strong. They go about their business in different ways. I think Tryon does a great job of utilizing a lot of different ways to get to the quarterback. Perkins is a power rusher. Like, he can one-arm stab and walk you back into the quarterback. He did that against Tevin Jenkins, the offensive tackle. against Oklahoma versus Oklahoma State, and so the way Perkins rushes is a little bit different. I think he's not as athletic as Tryon. So athletically, Tryon tests out a little bit more, a grade out a little bit higher than a guy like Perkins, who I still have a good grade on. But that would be the difference between those two, is the athleticism and the upside, and the fact that Tryon has that upside trajectory because he didn't play this year, and he's building off what he did well to close out 2019.
Okay, so I guess this is kind of the I don't want to say layup, but the expected question. Let's flip to the other side of the ball. Excuse me, the other side of the ball for a second. Everybody loves the quarterback. Everybody's wondering about the quarterbacks. Of course, we assume Trevor Lawrence is going number one. And I've heard a lot of talk about Zach Wilson going number two. And then once we get past that is where there really seems to be some uncertainty. How would you evaluate, just in isolation before we compare him to anybody else, how would you evaluate a prospect like Justin Fields?
He's my number 2 quarterback. And so if I were the Jets, I would probably go with Justin Fields. But I do understand the Zach Wilson appeal. And Wilson is my number 3 quarterback. I have like an 85 grade on Fields and an 83 on Wilson. So the gap, in my opinion, is not that far off. But I like Fields because he has the right temperament to play the position. You got to be able to handle pressure. It's the same thing with Jalen Hurts. You have that ability to not be flustered. It's the same thing with Deshaun Watson, not being flustered. That's what you want at the position, especially playing out in New York. You better have someone that can handle the moment, that can weather the storm, so to speak, and weather the atmosphere of playing out here, because we've seen quarterbacks have issues, albeit talented quarterbacks, not be able to handle the pressure of playing in New York. And I think Fields has that temperament. We saw that against Clemson. They took away one of his weapons when he got smacked. He took away his ability to run, so he had to beat a team one-handed, and he was able to do that to the tune of 6 touchdowns. So for me, Fields is just a notch above Wilson, although Wilson is very talented.
Okay.
Do you feel like the criticism against Justin Fields is justified, or in your eyes, when you watch him, does he pass the smell test?
He passes the smell test. He did. Think about the pressure he had coming into Ohio State. Dwayne Haskins just set Ohio State records, NCAA records, Big Ten records, and was a Heisman finalist. And so you lose that caliber of quarterback, and you bring in a guy that was virtually, unknown at Georgia. He played a little bit, but didn't play the position consistently, right? Because they had Fromm in front of him. So he had to follow that up. And he went out there and threw 41 touchdowns to only 3 interceptions that year, and then himself became a Heisman finalist. So I would say he's been able to handle the pressure from day one. So yeah, he definitely passes the smell test.
Okay, so with that said, now you mentioned Haskins. And I think I know how you'll answer this because I've done a little research into this myself, but for everybody listening, how do you compare Haskins as a quarterback to Fields as a quarterback? Are they similar? Do you think that not where Ohio State quarterbacks are known to disappoint in the NFL level is fair, or do you think these are two completely different players?
They're 2 completely different players with 2 completely different skill sets. Haskins is more of your classic drop back passer. Fields, one, has athleticism, and so he's a dual threat. So that right there is a difference. The second difference, Haskins' arm is stronger. Haskins can literally throw the football wherever he wants to on the field. Field has a strong arm, but Haskins has a stronger arm. And so, but I think where they differ is the fact that you have an athletic guy that can make these plays on the move and that can hurt you in a wide array of ways. And we saw both guys overcome adversity at Ohio State. Haskins wasn't the reason why they lost to Purdue in the one game they lost that season in Haskins' first only year starting at quarterback. And we saw Justin Fields overcome adversity time and time again. So they both have that mental component that you want to see, the ability to fight through that adversity, different skill sets. And but Justin Fields to me has the upside because he's also getting better every year. And I think that's something. Haskins still has upside. I think quietly Pittsburgh got themselves a steal by picking him up for cheap, essentially, after he got released by Washington because of his own doing. But I think there are two different players, and them playing at Ohio State is just by happenstance, because if Haskins doesn't leave, Fields doesn't go to Ohio State. He probably goes somewhere else. So both guys were good prospects, and Fields just goes about his business a different way.
I'm sitting there, I'm looking at this football guide as we're talking, and bro, this is a lot, man. So I'm over here and I'm trying to move on to like wide receivers, and let me tell you, this guy. You got split end wide receivers, you got flanker wide receivers, you got the slot, you got inside guys. Then you look. Bottom line is it is everything you need. Talking to Emery Hunt from FootballGamePlan.com about the draft, his 2021 draft guide. I want to move to wide receivers. Look, first round talent. Who do you see? Are there a lot of first round talent at the top of this draft at wide receiver?
Absolutely. Are you thinking about Jamar Chase and Devonta Smith, Jalen Waddle, the cast of characters? Those three guys I think are the elite talents, and there's something for everyone. You can find guys way into the late first or even the second round that can be legit day one starters. You're thinking of Kadarius Toney. You're thinking of someone like I'm a big fan of Diami Brown. I also like Baker from South Alabama, who's probably going to go later, but I have a really good grade on him. There's a ton of good guys. Marshall out of LSU is, Jamar Chase's teammate or ex-teammate. There's a ton of good receivers, and you're going to see that a lot in every draft class because of how college football has
the passing game has been
everything. So you're going to see a lot of good receivers and a lot of good corners. You're going to see that in bunches as more drafts come out, unless they go back to the run game being heavy, and you'll see more talented old linemen and running backs that'll go high in the draft. But until then, you're going to see receivers and cornerbacks, talented ones, come out in bunches.
Do you see that? I guess just looking at your draft class, how you have these guys ranked. Basically, do you think there's going to be a position that kind of dominates the top of this draft, or do you think it's going to be spread around where you're going to see your fair share of O linemen, your D linemen, a couple of quarterbacks, a couple of wide receivers? Like, I guess people aren't necessarily, unless you're a special caliber running back, you're not seeing a lot of running backs at the top of the draft. Do you think, will that change, or do you think this is going to be more of the same?
I think you'll see your run-on quarterbacks, and then you'll probably see a run-on corners and also receivers. You'll see a run-on offensive tackle. So when you see those four positions have those runs, it's going to push down edge rusher, running back, D tackle. You probably won't even see a defensive tackle taken in the first round. I think we'll see the early run-on QBs, then you'll see the run-on linemen, then you'll see a short, brief run on receivers, then probably corners. And then once you get to about pick 24, you'll start seeing a grab bag of assortment of players. You may see a running back, you may see a safety, or so you may see a lot of different things once you hit 22, 23, and 24.
Okay, so you get towards the end of the first round, then you start to see a little bit more need-based, or just best player available rather than I have to get this specific position because I value that position so highly in today's NFL.
And when when you're playing and when you're picking that late, you tend to not have too many holes. So you tend to go best player available. Let's say if you're Pittsburgh, you don't really have many holes. So you can probably take a running back. You can probably take someone that you wouldn't normally take,
Very good point. Yeah, when you look at it that way, from that perspective, those are your playoff teams and your better teams picking at that point in the draft usually. So, one other prospect I am extremely curious what your opinion on is. We only have you for a couple more minutes. I know you're a busy man. a position that my team, the Philadelphia Eagles, seems to ignore quite regularly is the linebacker position. And
just twisting that knife, man.
Micah Parsons out of Penn State. He's in Eagles' backyard, basically. What do you think about that guy?
I like Micah Parsons, and you're right about them ignoring the linebacker position. There's a couple teams that fit that mold of kind of ignoring the linebacker position. The Giants could be one. The Saints could be one. They tend to ignore that position for whatever reason, but Parsons would be a good fit. He could play inside or outside backer. Another one that didn't play this year opted out, but you understand why, because he was already considered to be a top 15 pick, and now he goes through the whole testing part, and that kind of meshes up what people thought of him, and he still has growth within this game. And because he could run, he could move, he could play on the inside, he could play on the outside. I think if the Eagles were to take the linebacker, that would be the guy that you would want to take in the middle, because, again, he will give them an impact player at the second level.
And I feel like it's something that Jonesy and I have talked about, and it's a point that I've made where I feel the top. You want your number one draft pick to be an impact player week one. That you hope that the player that you get at the top, and there's sometimes you can draft a project. Sometimes you bring in a quarterback, you want him to sit for a while. But at some point, you expect that the player that you get at the top of your draft, whether it be night 1 or night 2, to come in and be an impact player, make a difference week 1. Like, you bring up Micah Parsons. Are you saying that's that guy? He's somebody who comes in, you put him in the middle of your defensive alignment, and he's making a difference. Micah Parsons is a difference maker.
I believe so. I think when you're taking guys in the first round, you're aiming for impact starters.
Mm-hmm.
Second round you're aiming for starters. Third round you're aiming for rotational contributors, and everyone else you kind of can find upside that, okay, I'm gonna take a gamble on this guy because he could probably coach him up to be this. But when you're looking at the first round, you're looking at almost finished products, and that's where you want to select. And if you're talking about someone that can step in and play linebacker today, that's Micah Parsons.
All right, before we let you go, last question. When the draft starts, where will you be?
The draft starts April 29th. I'll be out there in Cleveland covering it with CBS Sports HQ. So you'll see me on the day 3 broadcast, which will be Saturday, I believe, May 1st. So, but I'll still be out there in Cleveland. They probably have me on a few things here and there, but I know for the day 3 draft, that's rounds 4 through 7, I'll be all over HQ.
All right, man. How much sleep do you think you're going to get once the draft starts, man?
Oh, man, I'm trying to sleep, get all my sleep in now. I know once I'm going to be hopping on different shows and boom, boom, boom. But I always will find time to sleep. Don't get me worried. Don't worry. I'll always find time to sleep.
All right. Well, when the dust clears, you got to come back on with us, because we need you to break down whoever the Eagles get. All right.
Absolutely. Consider it done.
All right, my man. Ladies and gentlemen, that is Emory Hunt of footballgameplan.com. Once again, let us know where we can find you, where we can find your work, and where we can pick up this NFL draft guide.
You can find me on Twitter at FBallGamePlan. Subscribe on YouTube at youtube.com/footballgameplan. You can pick up the draft guide at footballgameplan.com/2021 draft guide.
Bro, this draft guide is the truth. Y'all need to pick that up.
I started looking at it. You sent it to me. I started looking. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna have to dig into this for a week or two.
I'm about to hit up Staples. I need to put all this on paper.
Oh, I put this on. I printed out from Staples. This is what it looks like. So yeah, you're talking about 700, almost 600 pages. But it's good that you printed out this year, because next year when things get back to normal, you probably won't be able to print this out, because you probably have to print it out and put it in a binder as opposed to getting the spiral bound, because it'll be bigger because you have more teams.
I hear you. All right. Once again, that is Emory Hunt, footballgameplan.com. Thank you, my brother. We're going to bring you have an open invite. Come back whenever you want, man.
Appreciate you guys. Keep doing great work, man.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. We will be right back on the Jonesy and Brown podcast.